I mean, I don't know. I mean, nothing does shock us anymore. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago sitting at the breakfast table eating, looking at the Sunday New York Times, and there was some picture of something, very tragic on the front page, and then turning to the second and third page of the first section, which is always full of these high-end ads for $16,000 shoes or something. I mean, I don't know. It's just and it was just like these two double shocks. I mean, first of all, that I could so casually eat my cereal and look at this horrific picture on the front page and have no connection. I mean, it didn't even make me queasy. I mean, I could just continue. I mean, it was just there. And then I could turn the page and look at these advertisements for something that were just in a whole nother universe. And it was just my realization of how desensitized and removed, and I don't even know what the words are. I guess the only, for something to be newsworthy, it would take something radical, like I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it would take to traipsing patients into the corporate office and executing them against a wall. I mean, that probably would make news. I mean, the same patients that die through these convoluted systems, then we make it, we just eliminate the process. I mean, we make it more efficient. Economic structure and the way in which we think about distributing healthcare and the constructs and the corporate sort of capitalist commodification model. It's spreading everywhere. Well, in the early, more primitive days of managed care, and denials of care were very straightforward. I would sit 1,000 miles away as a medical director, and a doctor would call in and say, I want to do, I want to do a heart transplant, or this person, back to the heart transplant, or I want to. I remember a case where a physician wanted to do an exploratory surgery for a man that he believed might have cancer, but then he might have a strangulated bowel or something. But you don't know until you open up the abdomen. And at first I approved it, and then my supervisor came in and said, we don't pay for exploratory surgery. Either he knows what he's got or we don't pay for it. So we denied admission to the hospital. Now, I don't know what happened to that man, but it doesn't take much imagination to fill in the gaps and say, well, if he didn't have $10,000 where he could write a check to the hospital and be admitted to the hospital despite the lack of approval number to get his surgery, and then maybe even beyond that have to pay money. He probably died, maybe not that day or the next day, but probably from something that maybe could have been treated. Or he got sicker and then he had to be admitted as an emergency. So I think part of the reason why I mean, early on it was much clearer. I mean, the cause and effect relationship between a specific denial of care and the consequences to the patients it was much more discernible if somebody looked for it. But the problem is that the systems have gotten so sophisticated. So we've changed. It starts with even changing the practice of the way in which a physician thinks and acts. So if you have a form of insurance, or you go to a doctor who's been so influenced by the insurance model, and a recent example with that I know about has to do with some cardiac symptomatology in a person. So you go in and you have that, you express those symptoms. The doctor's response could be, oh my gosh, that's a serious set of symptoms, we need to do a workup on that. Or, I think you just have stress. Now, a physician whose practice and thinking has already been modified, whose hands have been slapped because they've ordered too many tests, or because they've been too expensive or they're too costly, even if it's by a different insurance company or a different hospital system than you have, but they've just been so changed in the way in which they think, may say it's just stress until things get so bad that they have to do something. And I've got thousands of examples of that sort of treatment of patients. So that patient goes home thinking, okay, I'm just stressed, I'm going to try to relax more, I'm going to go to a meditation class or whatever, and then they die 4 months later of a cardiac disease. Maybe the family doesn't even know what happened. They just, they die. It looks like they had a heart attack or whatever. And then it's too hard then to go back and connect the dots, but the connection's there. Now, the way in which this particular person was treated was the way it should be treated. They go in with symptoms that could be stress or it could be serious cardiac conditions, and they're sent immediately to a heart-lung institute for an evaluation. But a lot of doctors, especially if you have an HMO, are not going to do that. So that even if all the tests end up normal, the most life-threatening serious things have been ruled out, and then you can deal with the things that, the alternatives. So that's part of the reason, the way in which all these systems work so successfully, because if you, very few things in medicine happen temporally so closely that you can connect, one commission or omission on the part of a professional or a company with the consequences of death. But if somebody dies sooner than they should have because something could have given them a higher quality of life or increased the number of years of life, because maybe just it could happen in so many insidious ways. The choice of medication that a person's given, if they're given a cheaper medication instead of the appropriate medication, how often they see doctors and how they're evaluated. I mean, if they're given sort of minimal care versus the appropriate follow-ups and testing and monitoring and all of that. If the appropriate diagnosis is made or not made. So now, there are probably a lot of people who are suffering additional complications from their medical conditions, including earlier death than they would have, because the system has changed the way in which they're getting medical care.